Kara's pen hovered over the check line while the auctioneer's voice rolled through the pavilion like a drumbeat. "Sign it, Kara! 30 grand!" My Uncle Graham didn't face me. He just pointed at the roped-off pen where the winning bulls stood under bright lights, as if his finger alone could turn my money into his victory. The number came out of his mouth like it was a parking ticket, not my future. Around us, the Queensland cattle crowd laughed and clinked glasses, people in starched shirts and polished boots, all pretending the night was about community, while they watched a private humiliation unfold. Graham had thrown a bid he couldn't cover, not because he needed the animal, but because he couldn't stand a rival station owner smiling at him across the aisle. I was the invisible rope keeping his pride from snapping. My cousin Talia made sure I understood the show wasn't only for the people in the room. She shoved her phone so close I could see my own face reflected in the screen, pale and tight. A live counter ticked upward, little hearts bubbling up like the crowd was cheering for my discomfort. "Say hi to Kara," Talia sang, turning the lens from my shaking hands to my eyes. The rescue project finally paying her keep. Her grin was sharp, rehearsed, and hungry. She didn't need me to sign the check. She needed me to look small while I did it. It wasn't enough that they took my time and my labor. They wanted the moment recorded, packaged, and replayed, like a trophy clip. I signed anyway. The ink looked neat, almost elegant, and that made it worse. $30,000 wasn't a gesture. It was the deposit for the clinic space I'd been negotiating for months, the one with the small surgery room and the fenced yard where anxious dogs could pace before appointments. It was independence with a lease attached. It was also proof, in black strokes, that I still belonged to them. As the paper tore free from the checkbook, the auction clerk smiled at me like we were partners in something respectable. Graham slid the check away without even a nod, the way you pocket change. Then he snapped, "Go check the trailer. Make sure my investment's settled." "My investment," he said, as if my savings had just volunteered. People always ask why someone doesn't just refuse. They picture a clean scene, me throwing the pen, walking out, the crowd gasping, justice arriving on cue. Real control doesn't look like that. It's quiet and repetitive. It's 1,000 tiny edits made to your sense of what you're allowed to do. In my family, it started before I was old enough to name it. The birthday, forgotten, every year until I stopped mentioning it. The jokes about my charity wardrobe. The way my chores doubled whenever guests came over, because apparently I had a knack for being useful. The rule that I was always on call, even during holidays, because animals don't take days off, and neither did I eventually. The cruelty didn't need shouting. It ran on habit. By the time I became Dr. Kara McAllister, qualified and licensed, people outside the property treated me with respect. They called me doctor, asked my opinion, trusted my hands with their animals and their money. But inside the family home, I was still the spare tool in the shed, pulled out when something broke and returned when the job was done. Graham and his wife, June, loved telling strangers they took me in, as if they'd adopted a stray they trained into gratitude. They didn't say they benefited from a resident vet who charged them nothing, who kept their stock healthy, who fixed their messes in the night so they could sleep. In their story, I was lucky. In mine, I was trapped. Outside behind the pavilion, the air smelled of diesel, hay, and warm manure. The bull's trailer was parked under yellow floodlights, metal sides humming with the animal's movement. I climbed the step and eased the latch. The bull shifted, a massive shape in the dim interior, nostrils flaring, breath loud with stress. His eyes caught the light for a second and then slid away, searching for an exit that didn't exist. I put a hand against his flank. Heat rolled through my palm. He was power and fear in the same body, a creature built for strength that still panicked when boxed in. Standing there, I realized my chest felt the same way. We were both assets on someone else's ledger, valuable only as long as we performed. The ride home was a blur of road noise and low conversation in the front seat. Graham and June spoke like I wasn't there, planning where to pose for photos once the bulls settled in, debating which trophy needed a new shelf, laughing about how the old bloke from Ridgeview had looked when Graham outbid him. In the back, I watched fence lines smear into the dark, thinking about the clinic keys I wouldn't pick up now, the lease I'd have to explain away, the months of extra shifts I'd need just to crawl back to where I'd been. Every time the ute hit a bump, the check's absence felt heavier, like something had been removed from my ribs. Back at the homestead, the air conditioning hit me hard, freezing sweat into a sticky film. I tried to slip down the side hall toward my small room off the laundry, the one they always referred to as the spare, even though no one else ever slept there. June's voice cut through the house like a switchblade. "Don't walk off with that face, Kara. Tonight you actually did something for this family." She was unhooking diamond earrings, eyes narrowed with the kind of contempt that doesn't need anger to burn. Graham poured a drink and said, "You made it awkward out there. If you're going to contribute, learn to look grateful. We gave you a roof. We gave you purpose." Purpose. Like I was a product they'd branded. I felt the familiar reflex rise, the one that kept me safe. Swallow it, shrink it, survive it. People call it weakness when they've never lived inside it. I call it strategy I learned too early. When you're raised under someone's temper, you learn which words bring punishment and which words buy you time. You learn that fighting back doesn't always free you. Sometimes it just gives them a new reason to tighten the screws. So I stood there, gripping my bag strap until my hand ached, and I said nothing. Silence had been my shield for so long it felt like the only thing I owned. Then a voice came from the hallway, calm and razor clean. "That's enough." My grandmother Moira stepped into the light like a figure returning from a story people had stopped telling. For years she'd been tucked away in the eastern wing, resting, not up to it, too tired for the business. Graham had treated her absence like permission, but the woman standing there was not absent. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, yet the room shifted around her as if it remembered who built the walls. Her eyes didn't flick to me first. They locked onto her son with a steadiness that made his shoulders dip. Graham managed. "Mum, it's late. You should be in bed," Moira replied. "I saw the live stream," and the word landed like a verdict. June tried to laugh it off. "It was a bit of fun. Everyone knows Kara's part of the family." Moira stepped closer, voice still quiet, and that quietness was what scared them. "Do you?" she asked. "Because what I saw looked like you shaking her down in public. Give me the paperwork." Graham puffed up, reaching for his usual authority. "This is station business. I made a decision for the good of the operation. Kara agreed to help." Moira didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply said, "Give it to me," and the air in the room went thin. Graham pulled the folded copy from his pocket as if it burned him and handed it over. Moira glanced at the check stub, the auction receipt, the note that proved what had happened, and then she tore the pages into neat strips and dropped them to the floor. The pieces fluttered like dead leaves. "That payment is void," she said, "and from this moment so is your control." Graham's mouth fell open, then snapped into a shout. "You can't do that. I've been running this place." Moira's gaze didn't move. "You've been draining it," she corrected, "and you've been using Kara to hide the leak." She pointed her cane toward the front door. "Out, both of you. I want to speak to my granddaughter." For the first time in my adult life, I watched Graham hesitate in his own house. Moira led me down the long corridor lined with old framed photos, station wins, generations posing beside cattle and fences, proof of a legacy that always seemed to exclude me even when I stood inside it. When she shut the study door, her posture softened at once. She sank into her chair and breath like she'd been holding it for years. "Pour a drink," she said, voice rough now that the performance was over. I poured 2 small glasses from the bottle in her cabinet, the one I'd only seen brought out when important men visited. My hands still trembled, not with fear, but with shock at witnessing power shift like furniture being moved in the night. I asked the only question that mattered. "Why now? You've seen it all. Why tonight?" Moira stared into her glass before lifting her eyes. "Because I'm out of time," she said. "Stage 4, pancreas." The sentence was small and brutal. It didn't come with dramatic music, it just existed. My throat tightened as if the house had swallowed my air. Moira, the one person I'd always believed could have stopped this if she chose to, was dying. She watched my face change and clicked her tongue, impatient with pity. "I'm 81, she said. "Death isn't an insult, it's a timetable. What matters is what I do before it arrives." Then her expression shifted, and I saw something behind it that looked like regret with its teeth showing. "I told myself I was keeping the peace," she admitted. "I was really keeping them comfortable." She opened a drawer and slid a thin folder across the desk. "Graham didn't start stealing from you tonight," she said. "He started years ago." I frowned because the check felt like the theft. Moira shook her head. "Your parents left you something," she continued. Not cash, land, 280 acres on the northern ridge, good grass, a clean dam. It was meant to be your foundation. I flipped the papers and felt my stomach drop. A sale document, dated 4 years back. Signed by Graham as executor. The land transferred to a development group that had been carving up properties into lifestyle lots. My voice came out flat. He sold it, Maura nodded once. He used the money to renovate the homestead and buy Talia that car she pretends she earned. Cold anger spread through me like frost. It wasn't a flare. It was a settling. I pictured my parents, gone too early, believing they'd protected me with that land, believing it would be the one thing my relatives couldn't twist into a leash. Graham had taken it anyway, and then sat across from me at dinners, letting me serve him plates while he watched me save every dollar for a clinic I'd now have to postpone. I thought that was the worst of it until Maura said, "There's more." She pulled the auction catalog page I'd signed against and tapped a line of text. "Look at the bloodline." I traced the sire, the grandsire, the foundation bull. The name punched the air from my lungs. Black Monarch, my father's line. The one he'd spent a decade building, the one he talked about with a softness he never used for anything else. Maura's voice turned hard. "Graham didn't make you buy a random bull. He made you buy back your father's legacy using the money you earned patching up the animals he mishandles." It was cruelty with precision, the kind that takes planning. Graham knew what that name meant to me. He'd chosen it because it would hurt deeper than money. In my head, I saw him watching me sign the check, knowing I was paying for something that should have been mine by right, knowing it would feel like being robbed twice, once from my bank account and once from my memory. I stood, the glass heavy in my hand, and asked, "What do we do?" Maura smiled, and it wasn't warm. "We let them think they're fighting for pride," she said. "They're actually fighting for survival." The next morning, Maura moved like a storm wrapped in an old woman's body. Lawyers arrived. Files came out. Phone calls went quiet and clipped. By 8:30, every family card tied to the station account stopped working. By 9, Graham's access was frozen. By midday, he was raging on the veranda, red-faced, shouting about betrayal as if he hadn't been living on stolen ground. Most people, when exposed, try apology first. Graham went straight to attack. When the legal route closed, he reached for the one place where facts bend, the public. Talia started posting long, emotional videos about family abuse and gold digger relatives. She painted herself as the protector of her frail grandmother and me as the manipulator who'd swooped in to seize control. It worked faster than I expected. My clinic page, the one I'd been building with careful posts and client stories, filled with one-star reviews from accounts with no history. Messages came in calling me a monster. People I'd never met claimed I'd harmed animals, claimed I'd forged documents, claimed I was dangerous. I felt my confidence crack. Not because the lies were believable, but because they were loud, and loud has weight. I wanted to respond to every comment, to defend my name, to beg the internet to see me as human. Maura stopped me with a look. "If you feed a shark, it brings friends," she said. "They want you panicked. They want you explaining. We don't play their game. We build a new board." Weeks passed with the tension sitting in my chest like a stone. Every day I expected the next punch. Graham sent messages through distant relatives. June cornered staff members at the feed store. Talia hinted online that she had proof. I was unstable, that I'd threatened Maura, that I'd coerced an old woman for land. Meanwhile, Maura's health dipped and rose like a stubborn tide. Some days she was sharp and moving pieces. Other days she sat by the window, hand trembling, breath thin, and I could see the clock chasing her. The suspense wasn't only about whether we'd win. It was whether she'd live long enough to see it. She kept repeating one sentence like a promise. "They don't get to bury you the way they tried to." The event that broke them wasn't a courtroom. It was a ballroom, the kind full of people who believe their reputations are more precious than their organs. The annual Cattle Association Gala in Brisbane was packed with station owners, sponsors, journalists, influencers, and the exact crowd Talia craved. Graham arrived dressed like a man who still believed the world owed him applause. Talia floated from table to table, hugging people for the cameras, eyes always checking who was watching. Maura came in late, supported by me, cane tapping the floor. Conversations dipped when she passed, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. The whole room could smell something was about to happen. They just didn't know who would bleed. During the tribute segment, the big screen lit up. Talia smiled, expecting flattering photos. Graham leaned back, ready to bask. Then the video switched to numbers. Clean, undeniable transfers from the trust. A timeline of withdrawals. Receipts for luxury purchases, flights, hotel suites, renovation invoices, all tied to the accounts meant for station operations, and buried among them the Ridge land sale proceeds. Gasps moved through the room like a wave. A few people tried to laugh, thinking it was a joke. It was. The screen kept going, calm as a heartbeat. Then a final slide appeared. A short clip from the auction night, Talia's live stream, her voice mocking me, Graham ordering me to pay, my face tight with shock. The room fell silent in the way crowds do when they realize they're watching a collapse in real time. Talia grabbed the mic, panicked, and that was the last mistake she ever needed. "He wasn't real family anyway," she shrieked, meaning my father, meaning the dead can't argue. "That land was wasted on her. We kept this place running. We deserved it." She said deserved with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences in a room full of witnesses. You could feel the judgment shift. Sponsors' faces turned blank. Journalists leaned forward. People who'd smiled at Graham for years suddenly remembered they had morals when money was on camera. Maura didn't even speak. She let Talia's words hang there, recorded, unfiltered, and then she simply walked away from the stage with me at her side. After that, everything happened quickly, the way rot does once you crack the surface. Investigations opened. Statements were taken. Accounts were examined. The same relatives who'd messaged me to keep the peace stopped replying. Graham tried to play victim, but victims don't usually have spreadsheets of theft. June cried on cue, but tears don't cancel signatures. Talia lost sponsorships like Domino's, each brand cutting ties with a polite statement that meant, "We're not going down with you." The family's social circle didn't defend them. It distanced itself because that's what status does when it senses infection. Graham's rage turned into bargaining, then into silence. When the indictments landed, the silence finally had weight. Maura didn't live long after the dust settled. She lasted just long enough to watch the legal transfer complete and to see the Ridge land return to the estate it had been stolen from. She called me into her study one last time, her voice thinner but her eyes still fierce. "They made you small because it made them feel tall," she whispered. "Don't waste your life arguing about their lies. Build anyway." I sat with her hand in mine until it went still, and the grief that followed wasn't tidy. It came with anger, relief, love, and the bitter knowledge that she could have stopped it earlier but didn't. Even so, she stopped it in the end, and that mattered. I sold the bull Graham bought for bragging rights, and I kept the one that mattered, the bloodline my father started, not as a trophy but as a living thread back to the only home that ever felt honest. On the Ridgeland, I built the clinic I'd imagined, not flashy, just solid. Clean kennels, a small surgery suite, a shaded waiting area, a sign at the entrance with Maura's name on it because she chose to be my shield when it counted, and I refused to let anyone erase that. I hired local staff, paid them properly, and set up a fund for rural kids who wanted to study but didn't have anyone to sponsor them. The family called it spite. I called it proof. One afternoon, months later, a scholarship student stood in the yard behind the clinic, hands hovering near a nervous heifer, eyes wide with the same fear I used to carry. She looked at me like she was waiting for permission to exist in that space. I remembered being that young, being told I was lucky to be allowed near the table, being trained to accept crumbs as meals. I didn't give her a speech. I didn't sell her a dream. I just told her the truth, simple and steady. "You belong here." And as she exhaled, shoulders dropping, I realized the best revenge wasn't watching my relatives fall. It was standing on land they tried to steal and hearing my own life finally sound like peace.